wanted to share this story to warn people, but it's not necessarily a creepy encounter, just a sort of story that's really weird and freaked me out. I'm traveling around the country in my car. I've been driving for over a week from the city that I lived in, and I've so far slept in my car to save money. It wasn't until I got to a big enough city that I decided to treat myself to an actual bed that would be comfortable. I opted to choose Airbnb because, well, it's cheaper than hotels. I booked this Airbnb the day before I arrived at the city, so there weren't many options left. I had found this apartment on Airbnb that looked very new and modern, and it was in a great location too. The price was decent for its location, and it almost seemed too good to be true. The only downfall was that it was listed as a new listing and had 0 reviews. I figured that the price was low because it was a new listing, and decided to just give it a shot. I mean, it must be legit because it is Airbnb, right? When I got to the apartment building, it was older looking than I'd expected. I later found out and realized that my Airbnb was most likely the only renovated apartment in the building, and the building seemed to be in very poor condition. It looked like a dorm hall rather than an apartment building. Anyways, I let it all slide because I wasn't really paying too much anyways, so what could I really expect? The apartment itself looked like the pics, so that was good enough. Everything went well for the first 2 days. As a female traveling alone, I always make sure to be safe. I don't go out when it's dark, and I always lock the door. That includes every single lock, including the chain thing. Anyways, on the 3rd day I was out all morning, and came back to the apartment to change to head to the beach. I had again locked the door, including the chain. I was in front of the door watching TV while changing, when the door suddenly unlocked and someone opened the door. I am beyond lucky that I had put the chain lock on the door, or else it would have opened all the way. I was naked and no one else was supposed to have the keys but me. My first reaction was, excuse me, and I closed the door right away, locking it again. I came from the back of the door and I didn't look or see who was opening it. I sat in front of the door scared and shocked, realizing that this person could technically still get in here since they obviously had the keys to the apartment. At first, I thought maybe it was the owner coming back after I checked out, but I wasn't supposed to check out until the following day, so that wasn't possible. After crying for a few minutes, I recuperated myself and called the owner and told her what had happened. She told me that no one else should have a set of keys other than her and I, and that she's at work and that it wasn't her. I was scared to stay in the apartment because someone else could come in. I didn't want to leave because I had all of my valuables there, so it was a lose-lose situation. I then called my dad, who told me that it was not okay that someone has the keys and that she needs to take care of this ASAP. So he talked to her, and she told me that she'll be there shortly with a locksmith to change it and then give me a pair of new keys. She then proceeded to tell me that she had only had this apartment for 6 months, and that before I stayed there was only one other Airbnb booking. She also mentioned that it had been sitting empty other than those 2 bookings because she had been renovating the apartment, which now makes sense while the building looks like absolute crap and doesn't match the apartment. She told me that the only possibility for who that was could be the previous owners or someone related to them. That possibility in theory really messed with me. How is it possible that I was gone all day every day and the 10 minutes I was home someone tried to come in? Did they know I was there? What were they coming in for? If this apartment has been sitting empty for half a year, maybe they did this frequently. Or maybe they saw me come in and tried to do something to me. These questions are constantly on my mind. I just know that I'm so lucky that I put the keychain on the door. Or else, well, I don't even want to know what else could have happened. Needless to say, I won't be leaving a good review and I won't be staying in an Airbnb that has no reviews or seems too good to be true. I definitely learned my lesson with this one. This happened in January or February of 2024. I can't remember which. I was visiting family in southern France, and I didn't want to stay at their place, even if they offered, for personal reasons that I don't want to share here. I want to note that I visit them quite often and usually last minute, so I would never book the same place, and I would sometimes book a hotel room which was more expensive but better for me, as I don't necessarily want to socialize with the hosts. Even when I would book Airbnbs, I would always search for flats or studio flats, and not a room in a flat or house where other people live, as I want to be on my own. So this is an important criteria for me. So I booked this Airbnb within walking distance to where my family members stay, and it looks very nice on paper. I think it was marketed as a house or grand floor flat with access to a yard and a garden. It was probably one of the cheaper options. I don't remember for sure, but I wasn't going there for leisure or planning to have a very nice place for myself to have enjoyable holidays, if that makes sense. So I really just wanted something for convenience and wouldn't pay extra for any kind of luxury. There were not a lot of reviews, but the few ones were very positive. So I go to that place with my suitcase waiting in front of the house. I contacted the landlord who should give me the keys, but he's late. I spent at least 1 hour waiting outside, and I'm trying to be patient, realizing at least the neighborhood is still pretty nice and seems safe, even if I need to walk through areas that are slightly dodgy to get there from where my relatives stay. The landlord finally arrives. He seems like a good man and apologizes profusely, saying he was in another town visiting his cousin or friends and that time just flew by. First red flag. He says they were drinking and didn't have time to sober up, so he had to speed on the highway on his motorbike while being tipsy and drunk. He stops and he asks me half-jokingly to not say that in my review. I get a bit serious and tell him that he shouldn't be drinking and driving, but he says that he really didn't want to make me wait any further. I tell him that I won't flag that in my review. Spoiler alert, I will, but I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. The guy is pretty nice otherwise, and he seems trustworthy, very chatty, and also pretty open to socializing. And frankly, I was just happy I could finally get in and drop my stuff. The second red flag is when he tells me that I'll be living in a small flat adjacent to the bigger house that he lives in, but that I shouldn't worry because I'll have my own place, my own bathroom, my own kitchen, etc. I don't really like that too much, but I actually think it might be good because I'm not super comfortable being on my own in a ground floor accommodation, knowing that anyone can get into the yard and access the front door. Again, I'm paranoid. So knowing that someone I know is close by in case something happens gives me a sense of safety. God, was I wrong. He shows me around and all seems okay. It's pretty old, but as I said, I wasn't looking for a luxury stay. The part where I would stay is on a lower level than street level. Not exactly like a basement because there's still access to a garden, but I need to walk down a set of stairs outside to get into a flat through the backyard. This shows mostly when I'm in the bedroom, as I see through the windows that it's clearly at a lower level. Next red or rather yellow flag is when he shows me a door close to the bedroom, which is the connecting door between my part and his house. I was kind of expecting that, but I thought that he might need to at least cross the yard or access through the front door to get into my part of the house. He says that this door stays closed and it's locked anyway. Not as a warning for me to try to open it, but more like, you'll notice there's this door. It's useless for you, and what's beyond it is not part of what you're renting. We chatted for a little bit. Too long for my own taste, because I was tired and was also still annoyed at his lateness and not in the mood to socialize. He gives me his phone number because the Airbnb chat feature isn't good. It's easier to use WhatsApp, he says, and then he leaves. I start to settle down, open my suitcase, and they get changed before leaving to visit the family. I then go back to the place in the evening and decided to have a shower. If I remember correctly, what I'm saying next happened before I took a shower, because I remember locking the bathroom door, which I never do when I'm on my own, and I recall being quite anxious when taking the shower. So the biggest red flag before the last drop. I'm sitting on the bed, and then hear a knock and someone saying my name. 2 seconds later, before I get the chance to answer or even understand where the noise comes from, I hear keys turning in a lock and a door opening. As you might have guessed, it's the connecting door next to the bedroom. The guy enters and he says he can't find his phone and that he might have left it downstairs. I'm a bit shocked, probably because if he had come 10 minutes later, I probably would have been naked, ready to take a shower, or maybe even walking around in a towel since I'm supposedly alone. I know it might sound like I'm a big wuss, but keep in mind that I'm a relatively young woman alone in a house with a man in his 40s or 50s, and he has control of when he can get into my place at any time. I stay polite and try to tell him no, that I haven't seen his phone. I would have noticed. There's literally nothing except my open suitcase on a couch in the bedroom. He still gets in, speaking a lot and very fast while I'm still sitting there, not fully realizing what's happening and not having a chance to tell him to leave. He looks around the flat and obviously doesn't find the phone. Then he says sorry and asks if everything is fine, if I had dinner or something like that, then leaves again. At that point, I'm really wondering if I should even stay or not, since I know you get refunded only if you cancel 2 nights in advance. I just thought that I would lose money for the night that had started, and the following one knowing that I had booked at least 4 nights. I really needed to take a shower, but questioning if I should. I tried to see if there are available hotel rooms, but it's already too late to book or already fully booked. I decided to take my shower really quick, wondering if he could hear the shower and decide that he forgot something else to get in again. Nothing bad happens. I then go back to the bedroom, get dressed as fast as I can just in case, and then sit down and think. I decided that I'll just stay for the night and that I'll probably be less paranoid in the morning. If I'm still alive, that is. That's when I noticed the chairs in the bedroom. There are 2, and one of them has ropes tied around the armrests. The chairs are in good shape, and the rope is definitely not there to keep the armrest fixed to the chair, as they're just loose. To this day, I have no idea why they were there. I still think I should sleep there just for the night and try to use a chair to block the door handle in the bedroom, kinda like in the movies. But guys, this only works in the movies. I try with both chairs trying to pile them up, even trying to use the ropes one way or another. The handle can still go down enough to open the door easily. I think that at least if I leave them in front of the door, I'll hear someone if someone tries to open it. But the door opens the other way, and in any case, I didn't know what I'd do even if the noise woke me up. Again, I'm paranoid and anxious, but living alone abroad, my motto is to never ever take risks for my own safety, as I'm usually the only one who can save myself, so better to avoid any tricky situation. It doesn't mean that I never go out, but I wouldn't get drunk around people I don't trust, and I would take a cab if I feel unsafe going home on my own after midnight. I now live in a city that's rather safe, but I've had way too many bad encounters to not be careful. So from my external point of view, this is a story about someone booking an Airbnb with good reviews, with a nice and friendly landlord who's just overly open because he likes to meet people, and the ropes are just a detail. But for my anxious and paranoid self, It's the premise of a horror story or thriller where you shout at the stupid and trusting victim to get away ASAP before the guy comes back. So I decided to call my brother, who came to pick me up around midnight for me to spend the rest of my stay at his place. I spent a year studying in Mexico recently, and as you do on exchange, I had tried to travel as much as I could. Between the semesters, there's a big break, and me and my buddy that I'd spent most of the time with during the exchange decided to go on a longer backpacking trip through Mexico together. We had a rough plan on where to go and what we wanted to see, but we hadn't even booked our flight back yet, nor were we sure where we would take it from. We wanted to keep it flexible, and a few days before our trip ended, we had finally decided that we'd take our flight from a city that was close and had really cheap flights. But the city itself didn't really have anything to offer. Then on Airbnb, we found a room that was very close to the airport and a house with a pool, and we thought we would treat ourselves to a relaxed pool day at the end of the trip. It turned out that the hosts were a family. The husband was Mexican, and the wife was from Europe, and could even speak our native language. So we arranged that we would take a bus to the airport, and they would pick us up from there. When we finally arrived at the city, it was already dark, and the bus driver refused to drive us to the airport, since it was not directly on his route, so he just dropped us off on the highway. That was already a pretty crappy situation to begin with, standing with our backpacks at the side of the road in the middle of nowhere in a not-so-safe city in Mexico. But I called the host and sent them our GPS location, and they said no problem. They'll come and get us. So the husband came to pick us up, and it was a very uncomfortable situation getting into the car with a stranger in the middle of nowhere at night. It also didn't help that the guy looked like Danny Trejo without a mustache, and as I tried to make small talk with him, he only gave monosyllabic answers or straight out ignored me. Well, he's probably just not a big talker, I thought, and hoped we would arrive soon. Looking back, I can see a million red flags, but for some reason at that time we just didn't see them. Either we were too tired, or to be honest, we didn't really have any other choice than going along anyway. But yes, we arrived, and that really should have immediately set alarms off. We were in the middle of freaking nowhere. There were fields with sheep and goats all around, and all of a sudden, a gravel road branches off from the paved road, and along that gravel road there are about 6 huge mansions, all with 2-meter walls around them topped with NATO fence, huge gates, and at least 2 gigantic guard dogs per house. When we entered the house, we were greeted by the wife, a bubbly middle-aged woman who was very talkative but pleasant. She had actually cooked dinner for us, and we ate while exchanging small talk. The husband just sat at the table, not saying a word. After dinner, we more or less went directly to bed because it had gotten late, and we were really tired from a long day. The next morning, we saw that the weather wasn't that good, so we decided to go into the town and just see the few touristy things it had to offer instead of spending it at the pool. When we came back, it was already dark, but we decided to jump into the pool anyway to cool off because it was very hot and humid. The wife had actually joined us at some point. My friend made the mistake to ask how they were able to afford such a nice house. It didn't really match the price range of the jobs they were telling us that they were doing, and she deflected a bit, adding that her husband was very handy because he had grown up in the streets and had basically built the house himself. We realized that maybe it wasn't the best topic and broke the conversation off. That was the last day of our trip, and we had our flight back home early the next morning. We still had some weed left that we had brought on the trip, and we thought it would be nice to smoke one out since it was our last night. But as this was a family home and they had kids around, we thought it would be better to speak to our hosts if they would mind. So later in the evening, we had asked the wife if it would be okay if we smoked on the terrace. which for some reason she found quite amusing and just started laughing. She shouted to her husband, who was lying on the couch watching TV. She asked her husband if it would be okay for us to smoke weed, and asked what he thought of it. He had started laughing, but didn't really give an answer. We just looked at her with a dumbfounded expression, and then she told us, "Sure, just go ahead." So we went to the terrace and had started smoking our joint. Later on, they had actually joined us, and we just had a chat. And this is where things got really messed up. For some reason, they had started asking all sorts of questions about weed, where we got it from and how much we would have to pay for that back in Europe. They just seemed way too interested in the weed, and at one point the wife just nonchalantly revealed to us, "Yeah, well, we thought about doing that as a source of income, selling weed. But too many people die doing that because their cartels don't like it. Actually, my husband used to kill people for doing that." I immediately felt sober. Did she really just say that? As if he read my mind, her husband added, "Yes. When I was about 16, I killed a lot of people for the cartel for money." And he said it in a tone as if he just said he used to mow lawns when he was a teenager. I still thought that I must have misunderstood, so I texted my friend who was sitting across the table from me, trying not to make eye contact, because I knew we would freak each other out. He confirmed that I had indeed understood right. We discussed what we should do next and agreed that there's no immediate threat, and that we should just stay. We don't have anywhere else to go anyways, and it's already late. But then things got even crazier. We tried to keep our composure and not completely freak out while still making conversation with our hosts. A few minutes later, though, the husband got up and went inside to get something, and he came back with a literal kilo of weed pressed into a brick. He proceeded to break bits off the brick and roll them into a joint that probably would have knocked out Snoop Dogg. It was about the size of my thumb, and I guess it had about 2 grams of weed in there. Of course, he offered the joint to us, but we politely declined, saying that we were already pretty stoned. He seemed a little offended, but fortunately he bought our excuse. But it got even worse. A few minutes later, we heard a loud couple of bangs. The wife became a bit uneasy and asked, "What was that?" To which he answered calmly, 9mm. To confirm my suspicion that had indeed been shots. I would say it was around 7 or something shots, fired pretty quickly after each other. The wife got nervous and asked if we should maybe go inside, and, "What do you think they're shooting at? In the air? At cows? At people?" But he just shrugged it off and we stayed outside. Again, a few minutes later, there were even more shots, this time even closer. The wife got even more upset and asked again, "Should we maybe go inside? What do you think they're shooting at? Should we go inside?" And I don't think I'll ever forget when he then answered in the calmest way imaginable, "No, everything's okay. I didn't hear any screams yet." I don't know why, but the way he just calmly said that freaked me the hell out, and it's still making my heart beat whenever I think about it. After that, we quickly excused ourselves and went to our room. When we could finally talk, we basically just both lost it and panicked. What the hell were we supposed to do? We're locked into a house with a contract killer in the middle of absolutely freaking nowhere, and there's people shooting outside. We decided that it was probably our best bet to stay, because we thought, well, we are his guests. He's not going to harm us, hopefully. And it's probably better to have walls and dogs and a potential serial killer in between us and the people shooting around. So we barricaded ourselves in the room and didn't sleep a second until the morning, when we noped the hell out of there and went to the airport. I was never so happy to be patted down in security my whole life. This didn't happen to me personally. It happened to 2 of my cousins. They gave me permission to share this story, so I'll be telling the story from their point of view. My name is Leah. The story happened in April 2016. I was 29 years old at the time, and I live in Atlanta. In April, me and my cousin, who I'll refer to as Kate, wanted to go for a Caribbean getaway, but we didn't want to go to these popular tourist destinations such as the Bahamas, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, or Puerto Rico. We chose a lesser-known island called Dominica. It's a small island located between Guadalupe and Martinique, and the capital is Roseau. It has a population of about 72,000 people, so we booked an Airbnb located out in the countryside called Salisbury. It's 30 minutes away from Roseau. When we got there, the first 2 weeks went really well. We rented a car, and our Airbnb was perfect, and it was located near a nice peaceful beach. It was truly the getaway we needed. We explored the island, visited several beautiful waterfall locations, and even made some friends in the village we were staying at. But on the second day of the third week, something really horrible happened. One afternoon, Kate and I didn't go out and decided to just spend time at the nearby beach with the locals. Later on, the people left the beach to go home. Kate wanted to go back to the Airbnb, but I decided to stay there so I could enjoy some alone time. I closed my eyes, laying down near the beach, enjoying the peace and quiet. Before I knew it, it got dark, so I decided that it was time to get back to the house. I walked and arrived at the Airbnb, but as I was getting my keys to unlock the door, 2 men wearing masks suddenly ran out of the bushes and started beating me with batons. One even threw a rock at me, and I was screaming in pain. My cousin Kate came out and tried to defend me, but the men also overpowered her as well. They then ran into the Airbnb house and ransacked the entire place, and then they ran away. The other villagers saw what was happening and quickly came to our aid, but the 2 men had already ran away. They stole my laptop, my phone, and my wallet, but by luck, Kate's laptop was also stolen. Luckily, our passports weren't stolen. I was bleeding profusely, and Kate was bleeding even more. At some point, I felt like I was gonna pass out. The police came over, and we told them what happened, and even the police officers were horrified. Dominica is usually a very safe country, so everybody was in shock. 2 of the villagers drove us to the hospital, which was in Roseau. We got hospitalized because we were so badly injured. We even had to change the date for our return flight, but thankfully we got out alive. As far as we know, those 2 delinquents are still out there, but I really hope they got caught. This forever traumatizes Kate and I, however. I still like Dominica, and I would love to visit again someday. But next time, I'll definitely be a lot more cautious. Don't take this too seriously. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for this, but I'm just really glad I didn't take the chance. Super creepy nevertheless. About 2 weeks ago, I booked an Airbnb in another country. I was going there for a concert. The room was cheap, so I knew I wasn't going to be staying in a 5-star hotel. But it was only for one night, so I didn't mind as long as I had a bed. To start off, it already wasn't a great trip because my data roaming apparently didn't work in that country at all. I logged into a cafe Wi-Fi and planned my route in advance as best as I could. Managed to be at the house just in time, rang the only bell and waited. Nobody came out. I repeatedly rang and waited for 5 minutes. I noticed the door had a slot for mail and looked through it. I was shocked to see an entrance that looked like an abandoned barn. A super dusty couch right in front of the door, pieces of furniture covered in cloth, very dirty and extremely old. I usually love old houses, but that just did not look like a house that was in use or prepared for guests at all. I wondered if I was at the wrong house, and what do I do now? As a super old, unwashed looking guy walked towards the door from the street. I asked him if he knew where the Airbnb was. He mumbled something which I interpreted as positive, so I asked him if he was Tim, who was supposed to be my host. He said yes and opened the door for me. Well, I already described the entrance, so there's no point in doing that again. The centerpiece was definitely the super old creaky staircase that led to the upper part of the house. I followed him upstairs. He was heaving and coughing and just absolutely stinking of cigarettes, which wasn't exactly pleasant, but whatever. The second floor was also abandoned looking. It was super dark with clustered furniture hung with cloth, and it was randomly thrown together, and a super creepy curtain that I couldn't catch a glimpse behind. Another stair up and we were in my hallway, which was honestly the worst one. Cracks in the walls and old rural paintings and crosses hung up next to them. It seriously looked like the set of a horror movie. I usually don't have problems with decor like that. I'm goth, so anything darkly inclined is my jam. But everything looked so badly taken care of, so I got major creepo vibes from this house. He showed me the bathroom, which had a huge hole missing in the bathtub tiling in the wall. Everything just looked super dirty. He showed me to my bedroom, which was honestly okay. There were just a lot of creepy dolls on the shelves that threw me off, but the bed seemed fine. I asked him if he had Wi-Fi, and he said no, which really sucked. I really hoped they would have it because that meant I would have no way to communicate there. I asked him when checkout was the next day. He said it doesn't matter. Okay. He then dragged himself up to the 4th story, which was in complete pitch black darkness by the way, so that gave me very weird vibes. I definitely didn't want to get into the shower, so I just quickly changed and charged my phone. When I went to the bathroom, I realized that I didn't even notice the creepiest part. There were no locks, like at all, which really freaked me the hell out. I also noticed that there were so many half-used items that someone left there, like shower gels, toothbrushes, and toothpaste. I guess it was the guests before me. A random lash curler just laid abandoned on the shelf. Not like a, here you go for your use in case you forgot yours way, but it just looked like someone left it and nobody bothered to clean it away. I already made up my mind that I would definitely not stay the night in this house. My mind was just spinning scenarios. What if all these products were left by the people before me? And why did nobody leave horrendous reviews? Because they got murdered? I asked myself, laughing. I was super spooked out. I seriously debated if I should take all my crap to the concert because it just didn't feel safe in the slightest. But my back was really hurting from my heavy backpack, so I just took my essentials and left the room as soon as I could, not without sliding a folded paper under the door so I'd see if someone tried to open it in my absence. When I was coming down the staircase, I had heard someone turning a key in the front door. I was a bit confused, but in the advert it said that a couple lived there, so I expected to see the wife or girlfriend of the guy that I had already met. Instead, a middle-aged man enters and then says, "Hey, I'm Tim." All I could think of was, then who the hell was the other guy? I was really crapping myself inside, but had brief small talk with him and then finally left the house. I was shaking. I luckily made it in time to the venue, and the concert was well worth it. Afterwards, I was so tired that I knew I couldn't stay awake for the whole night, so I checked into a hotel. It wasn't perfectly clean, but at least it had Wi-Fi, a proper shower, and a door with a dang lock. The next day, I got thrown out at 10 a.m., so I made my way to get the rest of my stuff. I don't know why, but I checked the mail slot again and jumped back. The old guy was just snoring on the couch directly in front of the entrance door. I tried my best not to wake him, and I sneaked into my room to get my crap, and then I finally left this godforsaken place. I also want to mention that the door actually hadn't been opened, thank God. I really don't know if I overreacted, but honestly, from the first 2 Tims to the missing locks and a checkout that didn't matter, if I assumed the worst, this would have been the perfect setup to assault or murder someone. Best case scenario, nothing actually would have happened, but I probably would have had panic attacks all night. Usually I really love solo traveling, but this was just way too much. This happened a few years ago. The year 2018, me and 3 other friends decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was cheap and we had the time. So I mean, why not? We were all males in our early 20s. Our itinerary includes sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting bars at the beach, and basically just a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country's absolutely beautiful, and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip were, well, the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially shrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell us their drugs. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I just shrugged it off while my friends laughed it off. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce onto me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't feel too afraid as we were confident that we could handle them since half of them were not even sober. However, that is only the tip of the iceberg. The real horror started when we went back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning, and we were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap, and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors which swung inwards, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip, when we realized that the wooden block was now missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick. I know, it sounds like a horrible idea, but we used that instead since we didn't have anything that fits the holes to wedge the door close. We turned in for the night, seemingly not expecting anything since we had already stayed there for 6 days with no issues. I woke up to strange clicking sounds in the dead of the night. I got out of my bed and I thought maybe it's one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of the night? I wondered. I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside and saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push open the doors. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation as I then recognized one of the men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnbs and pathways during the day, so there's no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other dude had asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they allegedly found it outside of our Airbnb. I definitely smelled bullcrap in that moment, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my guys, and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances, and we stayed up until morning came in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report to the reception about their employee, but the description I gave them was not synonymous with theirs. They told me that the housekeepers they usually hire really only consisted of females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines, as we came to realize that we had let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost, and we got out of that situation safely. I can't imagine what would happen if I didn't wake up on that fateful night, as the doors were so close to being open. I was just grateful that it was our last night there. This is gonna be long, so where to start? I met him when I was 15 and he was 17. Looking back, the signs were all there. It had started out with small things. Us just roughhousing like buddies. We're both guys, by the way. But it would escalate to him taking me back behind the shed where my friends couldn't see, and then holding me against the wall, fake hitting me. Like pretending to hurt me while laughing the whole time. But he actually did hurt me. I would have bruises for weeks. One time he literally shoved my face in stinging nettles. But my naive 15-year-old self thought it was all in good fun. If only I knew then what I know now. We had started dating at the end of my sophomore year, and over the summer things progressed. He used to beg me to give him massages, and whenever I would refuse, he would pin me down and tickle me until I relented and said yes. And whenever I stopped before he was ready, he'd go back to tickling me. Sometimes he would just randomly pin me down and tickle me, and I would beg him to stop. But the only way to get him to stop was to literally fight him off of me. This happened almost every single time we hung out, and I grew to dread it. I don't know why I kept going back. Honestly, I guess I was just so in love with them. I'm 5'3" and weighed even less than I do now, about 100 pounds. And he's 5'7", and he lifted for context. I learned a lot in those days on how to fight someone off that's bigger than me. It wasn't just the tickling though. As I said before, he just liked to jokingly beat me up, but the force of his punches were not jokes. I would have bruises all over my arms and thighs from him punching me. One time I got in the front seat of our friend's car when he wanted shotgun, so he proceeded to punch my arm the entire 15-minute drive until I was almost crying because I kept trying to move away and tell him to stop. My friend who was driving did nothing. I don't know why. I mean, he was even older than both of us. I don't know why he thought that was normal. It wasn't just punching me either. I had recently gotten my ear pierced and he thought it was so funny to smack me upside the head. One time he made me bleed, and when I told him, he just said that he hadn't. I tried to talk to him about this so many times, asking, "Please just don't touch my ears." And every time I asked, all he would do was correct my grammar. This was over text. I was honestly just scared to say anything in person. We ended up breaking up and just staying friends. I spent all of my free time at his house like an idiot. Another thing he had started doing was always wanting to smoke me up, but never smoking himself. Huge red flag, I know. But at the time, all I was thinking was it was more weed for me. I say all of this to explain what our relationship was really like and how utterly confusing this all was for me. To this day, I'm still confused why he acted this way. And now for the part where I think he tried to kill me. I was 16 now and he was 19. The day started off normal. We were just hanging out. From what I remember, this time period is kind of spotty memory for me. The next thing I remember is him sitting on top of my chest and arms, pinning me down like he would normally do to tickle me. But this time he had both hands around my neck, choking me. Not in a sexual way either. like both hands on my windpipe. I couldn't breathe, could barely talk. I kept hitting his hands and arms trying to pull them off my neck. It wasn't working. I was trying to say, "I can't breathe, let go." But as I said, I could barely talk. I remember thinking in that very moment, am I gonna die? Is he really gonna kill me? The whole freaking time he was just laughing and smiling. I honestly don't even remember how I got him off of me, but I think I must have used my legs and somehow rolled over. The next day I almost forgot it even happened, until I realized that my neck was sore and bruised when I went to school. I texted him, "You left bruises on my neck," and all I got in response was, "Oh, sorry, my bad." I wish I could say that this was the last time I hung out with them, but it wasn't. I actually forgot it all happened until weeks later when I was talking to my friend and she was horrified. So I decided that I never wanted to see him again, and I texted him that. And no joke, all he said back was, "That's understandable." That's all I freaking got. I have no idea what he would have done if we actually kept hanging out, or if I was just a little weaker. Honestly, I don't want to think about it. I'm posting this on Reddit because it's not something I can ever really talk about. Being a guy, the response I've gotten is, "Well, you must have given him the wrong idea. He probably thought you were just down to wrestle." But now that I'm older, I know what wrestling with your friends is, and it's always mutually agreed on, and not like that. I'm still so confused. I'm 19 now, and I can't imagine treating someone like that. Oh yeah, and our whole friend group at the time called me crazy and said I was overreacting, all for me not wanting to hang out with them anymore, and they essentially all cut me out. Freaking wild. The story is about my dad's ex and my former stepmother. It's more so of a crazy stepmom story. But again, she was my father's ex, and she put me through hell. So I had known this woman since before I could remember. She was really good friends with my mom and dad through high school, so I already knew her before all of this. Unfortunately, my mother was an alcoholic and a pill addict, which led to pretty bad neglect for several years when I was very young. A story for another day. After missing most of my 3rd grade year, DCS got involved, and my dad got custody of me. He was dating stepmother at the time, and at first, everything was fairly normal. She was like an older sister, a friend. It wasn't too long before I noticed things start to change. One day when I was about 9, I was sitting on the living room floor playing with my back against the couch. Stepmother crossed the living room to go down the hallway, and as she did, seemed to shoulder check the doorway. As soon as she did this, she turned around and started yelling at me, accusing me of pushing her. I stared at her dumbfounded because I hadn't moved from my spot in the floor. She continued yelling and accusing me as I tried to rationalize it all in my head. Maybe I got up and don't remember, but why would I push her? I really had no negative feelings towards her at this point, so it didn't make any sense. But she was an adult and I was a child. Surely she knew what she was talking about. Stepmother was a taller, skinny woman with long golden blonde hair straightened through the length with those poofy 80s bangs on top. She typically wore high-waisted jeans and kept long, pristine red nails that would end up being a horrifying symbol to me in my teen years. Things only got worse as I got older. I would speak to my mom on occasion over the phone or in a letter the first few years, but each time I did, stepmother would become more and more hostile towards me, claiming that my contact with my mother was making me misbehave. But I was always an introvert. I loved reading in school, and I was a bit of a nerd and hated getting into trouble, so this accusation didn't make much sense to me even, but what could I do about it? Before too long, I noticed that stepmother had looked for any opportunity alone with me to treat me however she wanted. Stepmother quickly became extremely militant. Each morning she woke me up for school by bursting into my room and aggressively jerking the covers right off my body. Some mornings even grabbing my feet, digging her nails in, and twisting my toes. I was expected to follow a strict schedule on school mornings. At 6:15 a.m., get out of bed. At 6:15 to 6:25 a.m., get dressed for school. At 6:25 a.m., breakfast. At this time, I was expected to stand in the exact center point of the threshold between the kitchen and dining room, ready to take my breakfast and sit in my spot at the table. At 6:35 a.m., done with breakfast. 6:35 to 6:45 a.m., finish getting ready for school. And at 6:45 a.m., be sitting Indian style in the center of the living room waiting on everyone to be ready. If I did not follow the schedule down to the minute, punishment would be doled out. She would grab my hands while taking my breakfast, twisting one or two fingers out of socket, pulling me close to grit through her teeth at me with glaring, hateful eyes. Sometimes she would step in, including my feet, grinding her heels into my bare skin, twisting and glaring hate into me. On a few occasions, she even broke my wooden hairbrushes right across my face, leaving busted blood vessels and massive bruises. When the damage was too obvious, she would try and hide me for a day or so, gently waking me the next morning, acting as though I was sick, and telling me that I was too ill to go to school, then brushing my hair back and telling me to go back to sleep. This treatment rolled over into my days after school, and it would evolve into other aggressive behaviors. She made sure to conceal any sign of mistreatment from my father, but still some happened right under his nose. At the dinner table, she would dig her nails into my leg and scrape so hard that she would shave off chunks of my skin from my shins with her toenails. Even at church, placing what looked like an affectionate hand on my back, but would proceed by giving me an extremely painful and deep pinch into my neck, leaving huge bruises in their place that no one else would see. I was given an hour and a half after school each day to do my homework. After that, I was expected to go to our playroom where I was to entertain her daughter. Stepmother's daughter was between 5 and 7 when things started to get really bad. I was expected to play whatever she wanted, when she wanted, and to abide by any requests made. This was never actually said, but understood and later learned that way. One day during the summer, while eating lunch with her daughter in the playroom, she had asked me to open her dessert. She had a kid cuisine that she had merely taken all of 2 bites of. Stepmother would typically leave the plastic on her dessert as a system to encourage her to eat her dinner first. Of course, when she asked me to open it, I asked her if she was done eating her meal, passively addressing the fact that she had barely touched it. I was about 14 at the time, and it seemed like a plausible thing to big sister her about. But when I didn't give her what she wanted, she got up in a huff to go tattle to her mother, as most 6-year-olds would do. Stepmother was immediately enraged and barreled down the hallway in my direction. I don't even think I was out of view of her daughter when she grabbed me by the hair and started dragging me. I tried to keep up, but I lost my balance and fell to the floor as she continued to drag me down the hallway by my hair. Once we reached my bedroom, she had started kicking me in the stomach and then pulled me to my feet to face my bed. She then began rummaging through my belt drawer and pulled out my woven leather belt that she had already used more than once, and then proceeded to beat the hell out of me with the belt, starting at my shoulder blades all the way down to my ankles. Heaven forbid if I screamed, she would just beat me even more. The abuse also did not stop physically, as she seemed to get a real kick out of bullying me. She wasn't so worried about hiding from my father, as she would make it seem lighthearted and jovial when he was around. One evening, while having a family dinner at one of our local go-to sit-downs, she had started kicking me under the table, passing me horribly evil glares. After a few minutes of this, she spoke up. You chew like a cow. Then started laughing. Why can't you chew right? Doesn't she chew like a cow? My dad chuckled, thinking it was meant lightheartedly. But as he looked down at his meal again, her death glare was staring a hole through me with a tight jaw, and the gritted teeth told me otherwise. This became a new target for her abuse. She did this again later on when she noticed that I walked on the inside of my house shoes, one day kicking me in the back of the knees, making me fall to the floor. She began kicking me in the back, knocking the wind out of me, all simply over the way I walked. This became my daily life. Speaking out seemed ridiculous because all of these punishments just felt so absurd. I didn't tell anyone for a long time, but as I got older, people around me got wiser. When I was in middle school, my dad and stepmother were called in for questioning by the school. 2 of my teachers were highly suspicious of my bruises and constantly swollen fingers. Stepmother proceeded to put on an act, crying and acting hurt and shocked that they would even think she would hurt a child. I changed schools after that year. Things only got worse once I went to high school, as she seemed intimidated by my aging and gaining maturity. My male friends were off limits, and my curves were to be hidden in horribly unflattering clothes. I didn't really mind so much, as I really had very little interest in boys or displaying my womanhood to any degree. However, one afternoon while taking a shower, she burst into the bathroom to remind me of my timing. As she whipped the bathtub curtain open, she saw the hair growing below my waist. Before I could react, she grabbed the hair and jerked it down, pulling out a handful of my pubic hair. She cursed me for not telling her that I had started maturing in that way. I couldn't tell anyone about that for years. After the belt beating, however, stepmother's sister-in-law saw my backside and had called my dad at work, cursing him and threatening him to report it. I started going to her house on the weekends after that. After this, I got braver and became less scared. Once I saw people reacting to what little they saw of my stepmother's behavior, I knew that I was in the right for sticking up for myself. So I did, in subtle ways at first. I brought jewelry and makeup to school, and I started to give myself space to express myself. Then one morning, while running a minute or 2 behind on breakfast, stepmother came to the kitchen in a rage. Why wasn't I finished getting ready for school? Before I could turn around from rinsing my dishes, she was rummaging in the utensil drawer and then pulled out a fork. She backed me against the kitchen counter, pressing the fork to my throat. I don't remember what she said to me in those moments, but I remember her hot breath in my ear, hissing through her teeth at me, and I remember the chill of the cold metal prongs on my throat. I was 16. My last day there was a field day of my junior year in high school. I decided to wear a cute little outfit that her sister-in-law had bought me for casual days. It was a cute cap-sleeve striped t-shirt. It was cut femininely to suit my curves with long matching shorts. I knew she wouldn't like it, but I also knew that it was completely appropriate for a girl my age, even very conservative in comparison to my other peers. She saw me as I was walking down the hallway towards my bedroom, and I saw the rage fill her. She came at me nails first, grabbing my arms and digging her nails in. This is when I snapped and fought her off, shoving her into a wall. Rage filled me as I went to the living room to grab the phone. "If you touch me again, I'm gonna call the cops." She went pale, and suddenly, I wasn't scared for myself anymore. I couldn't control myself, and I laughed. "You're scared," I said, suddenly enlightened. Her face went blank as she walked towards me. "If I have to make your dad choose between you and me, it's not going to be you," she said coldly. I ignored this sentiment, because I knew she was delusional to think something like that. I went to my bedroom and packed a bag. She didn't stop me, but she did make sure to let me know that if I left, I wasn't welcome back. I ended up spending that summer in Florida with my stepmother's sister-in-law, and I moved in with my grandmother for the next several years. I only saw stepmother again once in my 20s. She had left my dad by the time I was out of high school for the man that she had been cheating on him with. She and I spoke briefly over Facebook that next year, and I confronted her all about what she put me and my dad through. Her response? "I'm sorry if you ever felt unloved. I was just really stressed, and you were a pretty rebellious kid." This first started when I was in my first year of 6th form. My friend, let's call her Candle, introduced me to her other friend who we'll call Amanda. I used to chat with Amanda every day for the next 2 weeks, simply because she used to message me constantly. She seemed like a nice girl at first, until she had started to make me feel uncomfortable around her, as she used to message me, "I want to cuddle you like a big teddy bear," and similar things to that. And I shot it down, and she got upset and threatened to call the police on me if I didn't go on a date with her. I'm a gay guy, by the way, but I wasn't out of the closet at this point in my life. I screenshotted everything she said to me, and I showed my friend Candle, and then she stated, "Yeah, I believe you. She's a compulsive liar. She actually lied about a teacher assaulting her, and she used to make things up to make herself sound better than everyone else." I was so glad Candle believed me and advised me to block Amanda, which I did. Fast forward 2 years later. I was now in college and I encountered her again. I didn't recognize her, and I was chatting to her without realizing she was the same Amanda from 2 years prior. That was until I messaged Candle on Facebook, as Amanda told me she knew Candle. Candle sent me a long paragraph. You do realize that's Amanda, right?" Then it all came flooding back to me. She's right. It's the same girl who threatened to call the police on me for not going on a date with her. She was dating a friend of mine in college, who's now my bestest friend. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen to me. Amanda claimed to have a crush on me a second time, and I shot it down right away and told her I'm not interested. She obviously took offense to that and threatened to call the police again, to which I just replied, "Oh yeah, what's the police going to do? This isn't even a police matter," which by looking at her facial expression angered her more, but she walked off. The next couple of weeks went by, and I ended up telling my friend about what she had been messaging me with, and he obviously believed me as he saw her messaging me in real time. She kept asking me on a date and saying that she liked me since day one. But here's the thing, she was in a real relationship with my friend. Naturally, my friend got upset and called her in front of me, and she claimed she had no clue what he's talking about and told him I'm making up lies. Then he forgave her, as she admitted it was true just a week later. To my annoyance, she began hanging out with us. I was nice to her because I didn't want my friend to get upset. She tried telling me that she had 2 children at 17, with one being 13 and one being 3 years old. I thought, that's odd. Something wasn't adding up. I should have called her out, but my friend was there and I didn't want to upset him. She even stated that the 3-year-old child was my friend's daughter, even though he looked confused like it was his first time he ever heard of this child. When she went home, I asked him. He stated, "No idea. She never mentioned a child before now, and we definitely never had sex. Very strange." Fast forward a year and I was working in a shop. She had suddenly showed up and asked to speak to me. My manager let me go on my 30-minute lunch. She was with her friend and she wanted to tell me that my best friend was manipulating her and that he was always hurting her, which I knew for a fact wasn't true. I'm also going to be referring to my friend now as Marcus. Marcus wouldn't hurt a fly, but I just listened to whatever else she wanted to say. She said that she was trapped in a relationship with him and felt scared of him. No idea why she was telling me this, knowing I don't like her. I just acted like I believed her and headed back to work. I then came home and FaceTimed Marcus, and I told him everything that she told me earlier that day. He started crying his eyes out because he found out she cheated on him with another guy. A friend of his showed him a picture as proof and forwarded it to me. It was definitely a picture of her with some guy kissing on the bus. I told Marcus that he needed to get away from her ASAP, which he did, until the next day they were back together as he yet again forgave her. We started doing group video chats, me, Marcus, and Amanda at her request. And remember her 3-year-old from the year prior? Well, now she's a 5-year-old named Lily, who literally never existed. And I asked her about the 13-year-old she mentioned, and she just replied with, "I don't have a child other than Lily." And the next couple of months go by, and she used to say, "Lily's in bed," or "Lily's at school," etc. Well, I called her out. She used to show us Lily by turning the camera to a pitch black area of her bedroom, and then quickly put the camera back to her. I thought this was odd, and I then said, "Why did you move the camera so fast? We didn't even see anything." She then replied, "Well, because she's camera shy," or "she's asleep." I just couldn't take it anymore. It was excuse after excuse. If Lily was Marcus's daughter, he deserved to see her, as he literally never met or saw Lily, not even once. I sent her a long message stating that Lily simply does not exist, and why aren't there any pictures of her? Then I blocked her because I just had enough of her playing games with my best friend. She then went on people's Facebook, and I kid you not, she took photos of random people's children and claimed them as Lily. Marcus and I looked at each other and we knew these were different pictures of random kids. Some of them weren't even girls. This went on until one day me and Marcus went to Amanda's mother's workplace, and Marcus showed her all the messages, especially the ones about Lily and the many pictures of her and the random guy she meets up with. Some of the men Amanda met up with were like 50 to 60-year-olds, and we found her on a dating website asking for men to fatten her up. We showed everything to Amanda's mother. Her mother was furious. She said that Amanda never had kids, she was never assaulted as a child, and she knew that something was odd as she got into some random man's car just the day before. I really thought that this was the end of Amanda, but I couldn't be more wrong, as Marcus, like an idiot, met up with her that evening and forgave her for like the millionth time. And then something strange happened the next day. Marcus called me on FaceTime and he was furious with me. I asked him what was going on. What did I do? He told me I was a bad friend and he wanted to cut me out of his life. I was in shock, and I actually heard Amanda laughing in the background. Then it clicked. She said something about me which wasn't true, and now me and Marcus are arguing like crazy, and he blocked me on everything, which really broke my heart, as this guy was my best friend, and now he's believing his compulsive lying girlfriend over me. Marcus and I were having an on and off argument all the time, and Amanda was at the root of it, telling him lies and manipulating him like she was jealous of our friendship. Maybe she thought I was a threat to her relationship with Marcus and tried to split us up as best friends. She literally used to invite me out with them, and when I turned up, she used to be like, "I wanted to spend time with you. Why is he here?" "Excuse me? You're the one who invited me." This happened every single time until one time I snapped back at her, which made her cry, but I didn't care. She needed to stop doing this to me, as it wasn't healthy for my mental health. A few weeks go by, Marcus was texting me on Facebook Messenger, and we were having a laugh like we used to. He went to the bathroom as he was with Amanda. Then I suddenly got a text from Marcus again saying, "Hi, it's Amanda." I just replied with, "Hey." And she had started sending me more threatening messages saying that I need to leave Marcus alone and that he doesn't like me and I need to move on. I was just like, what the hell? I ended up arguing with her over this, asking why the hell she's using his phone to send me these messages. Amanda was like, "I dare you to come say that to my face." At this point, I had had enough, and I contacted a friend of mine who we'll call Jasmine. I told her all about the situation, and I ended up in tears on the phone. I've known Jasmine since primary school, and we've been close friends since. So she naturally got defensive, and she asked me to get in her car and she'll drop me off where they are so I can say it to her face. Jasmine wanted to hurt Amanda for what she's done to me. We saw them, and then we confronted them. Marcus genuinely had no clue what was going on until I showed him the messages that Amanda had sent on his phone. He was furious, and he walked off in tears. I ran after him, leaving Amanda and Jasmine alone. Marcus and I hugged it out, and we had a talk about what's happened. He was telling me that he isn't allowed friends anymore, and Amanda even made him choose between her and his family, which made me even more furious. I had had enough of the way she was treating my best friend. The next day, Jasmine messaged me and said she can't be friends anymore as I was bullying Amanda for months, which wasn't even true. I would never bully anyone. I said to Jasmine if she was really my friend, she would know that Amanda was lying, but obviously not. To this very day, I never saw Jasmine again. This felt like a big betrayal of our friendship, honestly, and I would never talk to Jasmine ever again. This was over 6 years ago. Marcus and I were doing better, and he wasn't letting Amanda manipulate him anymore. That was until these boys came into our lives. Well, first was another girl I was friends with named Alice. I knew Alice for years, and I invited her out with Marcus and I to a pub for a few drinks. It was a nice evening, and Alice even called Amanda and told her that she needed to leave Marcus alone. Later that evening, we said goodbye, and I was naturally worried for Marcus, as he's like a little brother to me at this point. Alice asked if I was gay, which I am gay, but I wasn't out of the closet yet, so I responded with no. Alice then said, "Then why are you worried about Marcus? You obviously fancy him." "Well, no, he's like a brother to me, and we've been through a lot because of Amanda, so I obviously do care about him." I thought to forget about this conversation, so I assumed that she was just making conversation. Alice messaged Marcus asking him out on a date on a messaging app, and by the end of the week they had started dating. I was really happy that he's moving on from Amanda, but boy was I wrong. I had started receiving messages from Alice's brother and his friends stating that they're going to slice my throat, and messaging Marcus to help them beat me up. We were talked into joining a group video call, and the call contained me, Marcus, Amanda, Alice's brother, and his friend. They were saying horrible things towards me, saying I should die and that I hurt women, which wasn't true at all. It was just more of Amanda's lies, and I was messaging Marcus to back me up because he was quiet while I'm trying to defend myself against these crazy guys. He just read my messages and still sat there not saying anything. At this point, I had enough, and I just left the call in the group, and I blocked all of them apart from Marcus. Marcus called me the next morning saying sorry for not defending me. I just replied back with, "Well, that's not good enough. They were literally threatening me, dude." Marcus went quiet and said sorry again. By that point, I had ended the call because I couldn't be bothered with this stress anymore. Next thing I know, Alice was denying that she ever dated Marcus and claiming that I had made a fake account of her on the messaging app. Are you serious? I also noticed Alice was being besties with Amanda on Facebook, so that's the puzzle fitting. At this point, I wanted to just end my life. I was at my lowest. I was losing all of my friends because of this psychotic Amanda. This was the start of my depression getting worse and worse. Marcus and I eventually made up, and we're best friends again. But there was a time period where we didn't talk for over a year. I guess that's me trying to move on with my life, but we eventually started talking again. and Marcus and I met up again, just the two of us, and he was saying how sorry he was for everything he's done. I told him it's okay. He was just under Amanda's control. Fast forward to 2024. Marcus has a new fiancée who's a very lovely girl, and I'm gonna be the best man at his wedding because I stopped him from jumping every time Amanda cheated on him. This part I did leave out in the story, but yeah, that happened. He now sees I was always there for him, and we're closer than ever. He defends me a lot nowadays, and he always has my back. I've seen Amanda here and there a few times, but when I do, I never acknowledge her. She truly was a psychotic woman. Back in my single days, I often tried to use online dating apps. I talked with this one guy in particular. For the sake of this story, I'll call him Tom. Tom and I had started chatting after we matched, and it went well, so we progressed to talking over the phone. He had a nice voice, and I liked that he could carry on a conversation because I always feel sort of awkward with talking to people, and I have the problem of running out of things to say. My mind will draw a complete blank when I'm nervous. So having him talk to me on the other end of the line was a nice relief. After some successful phone conversations, we went on a couple of dates in person that were surprisingly very pleasant. We met up at public venues, a couple of restaurants, the usual. We both had a background in English, and he was also a writer just like me. So it was nice to have these interests in common. Our conversations were easy, in-depth, with a nice flow. I invited him to a function in my community where he introduced himself to my neighbors, friends, and family. They kind of looked at me questioningly, like, "Is this your new boyfriend?" raising their eyebrows. I told them no, that we were just friends who were still getting to know each other. It felt too soon for me to call him my boyfriend, but Tom said something different, telling everyone that I was in fact his girlfriend. I had to keep correcting him. I felt a little embarrassed, and I had really regretted bringing him to the gathering. Overall, we really only dated. I use that term loosely, and it was for about 3 weeks before things started to get really weird with him. Tom was increasing his number of text messages and wanting to spend a lot more time with me, asking to see me almost every single day. At first, I thought it was flattering. I enjoyed the attention and the feeling of being wanted, but at some point, I'm not exactly sure when, it had escalated to a really uncomfortable level. I remember just feeling smothered. He'd blow up my phone asking me what I was doing, but it didn't seem like he was asking me in a normal, "How are you doing?" kind of way. There was a controlling undertone to the question. When I answered, he'd want to know every detail about where I was, what I was doing, what time I was doing it, everything. I considered that maybe he was just feeling insecure and he would calm down with some time. On our next outing, I met up with him and my friend so we could go out to a bar and hang out. At some point though, my friend wanted to leave because she wasn't feeling good. We said goodbye to Tom and I left the bar to go take her home. When I checked my phone after arriving home late that same night, I saw that I had a bunch of angry text messages from Tom about, "Why didn't you kiss me goodbye?" and things like, "You don't really like me, do you?" I just wrote back saying that I had to take my friend home. I didn't know I was supposed to kiss you. Kissing shouldn't be an obligation. Sorry, I just didn't think about it because I was occupied. Can we let this go? I'm really tired and I want to go to bed now. He just said back, "Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Please don't ghost me, okay?" Or something along those lines. I don't know why, but I just felt really weird and that he was way too clingy. And it worsened from here. Moving forward, whenever I talked to him, it seemed like he would deliberately be trying to initiate an argument or fight. I'm not the confrontational type, and this was incredibly energy draining for me to keep up with. "Why does everything have to be an argument?" I asked him. He explained how he grew up in an abusive household and that he was used to the members of his family fighting and arguing all the time. This felt normal to him. I explained, "Well, I'm not used to this, and frankly, it feels a little scary to me. People in my family talk things out calmly whenever we have disagreements. We don't raise our voices, jump to accusations, or have temper tantrums." "You're right," he said. But of course, this didn't change. I lost the spark. The initial attraction I had for Tom was now gone. I actually felt repelled by him now. I decided I just couldn't see him anymore. I felt really sad and guilty for his life situation and the way he grew up. But at the same time, the roller coaster dynamic of our communication was really starting to take a toll on my own mental health. When I broke up with him, he had threatened to commit suicide. I didn't know what to do, so I asked my parents and some of my old psychology course classmates for advice. Everyone advised me that Tom's mental instability wasn't my responsibility, and that he needed to go seek help. He kept flooding me with messages on all of my accounts. As I mentioned before, he was a writer, so he'd send beautifully written lengthy pleas for forgiveness. I replied with, "I really just need a break right now," but he ignored my messages and would keep trying. At one point, he had sent me a photo of his dog, telling me that his dog says, "Hi, I miss you." That's when I thought, okay, this is weird and manipulative, so I'm going to block him. And I did. I blocked him on everything. Phone numbers, social media accounts, etc. When he couldn't reach me, he resorted to some drastic measures. He emailed my parents. Yes, my parents. "Why is he messaging us?" my parents asked me. "This feels weird and creepy." "I don't know," I said honestly. "He's pleading us to convince you to get back with them." "I don't want to be involved in this," my mom told me. "I don't want you involved either," I said. My parents knew the whole ordeal already because I'd asked for their advice when he threatened suicide. So while having a discussion about it, our consensus was to offer no response. They proceeded to block him as well. Next, it was my friend who had gone with us to the bar. Tom is messaging me, saying that you broke his heart or something," she informed me. "What happened? Did you do something to him?" "I broke up with him. Just don't respond and block him," I said. She obliged, but that wasn't the end of it. Then Tom reached out to my neighbors. I guess he remembered their names at the community function, and he memorized them all by heart. He reached out to each and every one of them with a lengthy, elaborate story about how we had been together for at least 6 months, and that we were passionately and madly in love. In this story, he had portrayed himself as some kind of a victim, and I was this villainous man-eater or something. Something weird. I don't know, because I didn't want to read it. "What did you do to this poor guy?" I kept being asked over and over again by different neighbors. I was forced to keep repeating an explanation about what happened. "We only went out for like a few weeks," I said. "A month at most." I advised them to please not respond or encourage him. Honestly, I'm a very private person, so having my whole community know about my situation was deeply humiliating for me. This went on for about a year. I'd have someone tell me, "Tom tried to reach out to me again." There was one older lady neighbor of mine that actually continued talking to Tom over email even though I asked her to stop. She told me, "But he writes so beautifully, and he's a beautiful dark soul." The whole thing had actually put a rift between her and her husband, so yeah, that was a thing too. A separate neighbor told me that she was afraid for my own personal safety. She said, "He seems like a stalker type like from those crime shows," which didn't do much to help my anxiety. I spent a lot of time indoors for a good while after that. I felt withdrawn, insecure, deeply embarrassed, and most of all, scared. I felt like I had to look over my shoulder whenever I stepped outside of my own home. I took a long break from dating apps, feeling a bit shaken up from the whole experience. 2 years later in 2018, he texted me from a different number saying, "You know who this is. If you still don't want me back, don't respond and I'll leave you alone forever." Even though he didn't give me his name, I just knew it was Tom. Frankly, I was relieved. My first inclination was to think, wow, I'm finally free. Thankfully, he hasn't messaged me, my friends, parents, or neighbors again since. I just hope it stays that way. Some extra information before I bring this to a close. I must have a personality type that draws in these sorts of people. Because when I finally met my current husband in the same year of 2018, his mother pulled the same stunt on me, the smear campaign. This happened in 2020, and we were forced to cut contact with her. But that's a whole nother story. So I'm currently a sophomore in college, and the bar scene here is pretty big. Going out for the night to get special deals on alcohol so you can get plastered with your friends is the kind of go-to here. Despite this, I'm not really a huge drinker, and I don't enjoy it a lot because it tastes so bad and hurts my stomach. I do enjoy the company though, and I often just go out with my friends or meet new people. A lot of times I'm called the dad of the group because I end up taking care of them all the time. That's the prelude to what happened when I decided to go with them on one Friday night. So we all got dressed up, pre-gaming a bit at my friend Q's apartment before we took an Uber downtown to one of our pretty well-known college bars/clubs. After we got in, my friends immediately split off into tiny groups coming over the club for girls that they wanted to try their shot at spending the night with. This is going to make me sound weird, but one-night stands aren't really my thing, and I don't want to end up cock-blocking my friends. So instead of looking for girls, I usually find someone at the bar and just make friends with them. I was chatting with some dude that was wearing a cowboy hat when eventually a girl approached me. She was pretty cute, probably 5'6" with dirty blonde hair, and eyes that I think were light brown. But they were so light they almost looked gold, which threw me off a bit at first. She asked me if she could buy me some drinks in exchange for being her friend for the night, and I of course accepted. Because hey, that's what I came here for anyways, right? Anyway, she kept her word and we had started talking to each other, and she introduced herself as Alexia, but to call her Alex. I asked her some basic stuff about if she came with friends, if she went to college here, etc., to which all the answers were no. That struck me as pretty odd, as it's honestly pretty unsafe to be in the downtown area alone, especially for a girl like 1 a.m. in the morning. She said that she wanted to hear more about me though, and she actually seems pretty excited to listen. It felt like a really nice change of pace because I'm usually the one learning about other people, not the other way around. It also could have just been the alcohol starting to take effect since I'm actually a pretty big lightweight, as like I said, I don't actually binge drink often. The whole time I was talking, she had stared into my eyes and had this warm smile that made me feel so acknowledged, if that even makes sense. I felt like she was really enjoying her time as much as I was, and that just made me even happier because I thought I had really made a new friend. That was when her demeanor then began to change though. She started to get kind of flirty, and eventually asked if I wanted to go home with her. Like I said, I'm not really the one-night stand kind of guy, and I explained to her that I like to get to know people a little bit better before sleeping together. I'm pretty sure I saw what I think was anger flash across her face, but it was quickly replaced with another smile, and she suggested just going home and watching a movie instead. I agreed and pulled out my phone to begin ordering an Uber, but she basically grabbed my wrist and started guiding me outside. I was confused at this, trying to ask if she was planning to drive after drinking, but she wouldn't really answer me. We eventually got outside the club, and she had pointed to a black Honda Civic parked right at the front of the club. That was when all of the warning bells rang like a tornado had just passed through them. I was pretty drunk at this point in the night, maybe 6 or 7 drinks deep, but I was still aware enough to see the red flags. She said that she had come alone, but the lane the car was parked in was only for pickups, and I never saw her order an Uber. Somebody would have had to be driving the car. This was enough to make me uncomfortable, and I asked again if she was planning to drive the car. She said yes as she continued walking me closer to it. I knew right then that she was lying, and as we got closer, my heart sank as I noticed the outline of 3 other guys in the car. Right at that point, my adrenaline kicked in, and I yanked my hand away from her and said there's no way in hell I'm getting in that car with her. She tried begging me one more time, saying that she really wanted to have sex and would let me do whatever I wanted. But I had already turned around and started to walk back to the club. She started cussing me out then, practically screaming at the top of her lungs as I walked back up to the bouncers to go in. I texted my friends what all happened, and we all met back up and went home. It was obvious she was going to college bars trying to get guys drunk before offering to sleep with them so she could get them in that car with the 3 other men to then rob them and do God knows what else. I called my city's anonymous tip line, and I left a detailed description of the girl, car, and the place where it happened. That night was a real wake-up call for me, and I'm so thankful that despite being drunk that night, I was able to piece together what was actually happening before it was too late. Please remember to always be safe when going out with your friends, especially when it's late at night or if alcohol's involved. I'm currently a 17-year-old male. So when I was 13, I went to Comic-Con with my grandparents in my country, which was held in our capital city. I met up with some of my older online friends who were in the ages of 17 to 19. Yeah, I was a stupid kid back then. They invited me to a bar near my hotel and asked me to bring my grandparents with me just to be safe. And thank God they told me to do that. The moment we sat down at the bar, my grandparents sat a few tables away, but still being able to see me. And basically, I mostly just spent time talking with my friends. It was nice. But I had noticed a man sitting on the same bench as me, but on the other end. Each time I looked over at him, he was closer and closer. Well, finally my grandma comes over to me and told me to get up because we're leaving. And so I did. I then told my friends that I'll see them the next day. Well, when we got to the hotel, my grandmother told me that she saw the guy rubbing himself while he was looking at me, and it looked like that he was relieving himself while staring at me, and that when he got too close, my grandma saw him start to slowly reach for me under the table, probably trying to grab my private part. Since then, I never met up with any of my older friends in any kind of bar or anywhere. I was really young and stupid back then. But yeah, pretty crazy. The story isn't mine, but my grandmother's. My grandma, we'll call Mary, was a very small woman. A stiff breeze could blow her away. My dad and his 3 brothers would make jokes about how she could fit in their pockets for my whole childhood. She told me this story when I was a teenager as a way to remind me to always be vigilant. We're in Canada, and the drinking age in my province was, I believe, 18 at the time. This would have happened in the late 60s into the 70s. My grandma had gone to the bar for some drinks. Now, it's been a long time since this story has been told to me, as I'm now 30 years old myself, and my grandma told me when I was under the age of 18, so some of the details are fuzzy, but my grandma had been having a few drinks and had gone to the bathroom, leaving her drink unattended. She came back and drank it as if nothing had happened. She was having a good time, but it started to feel funny. She said that her body started to feel weird, so she got up and managed to get herself up to the bathroom again and locked into a stall before her body stopped working properly and she lost the ability to move. I'm not sure how long she was in the bathroom for, but she stated that she stayed in that stall until whatever had been put into her drink started to wear off and she was able to go home. She never found out who drugged her and never left a drink unattended again. Now, the story isn't all that scary compared to many others, but that could have ended very badly for my grandma. Moral of the story: never leave your drink unattended, and if you do, just buy a whole new drink. You never know if someone could have slipped something into your drink, and you may not be as lucky as my grandma was. Stay safe, everyone. Names have been changed for privacy reasons. This story begins at the end of 2011 when I had just turned 19 years old. I was a freshman at the university in my city that I grew up in, and I was looking for a new job. I had finally found one as a server at a downtown bar that was just shy of a mile away from my dorm. I didn't have a car at the time, so I would either walk to work or ask friends for a ride. I actually liked walking though. It gave me some time to clear my head from my crazy college schedule. My coworkers at the bar were really nice and welcoming, but one certain worker, a bouncer named Jason, gave off extremely creepy vibes. He was a big guy about 6 foot tall and well over 350 pounds. Not the muscly type of 350 pounds though, more so the obese type. Not trying to be mean, just trying to paint a picture. I never really spoke to him, but oftentimes I'd feel him staring at me, or he'd just stand uncomfortably close to me. I just always had a bad feeling when he was around, which is not how you want to feel around someone whose job it is to protect you. I think the only words ever exchanged between us were a quick hi or thanks. One night I ended up closing the bar, and my manager asked how I was getting back to my dorm. I told him I was going to walk, but it was 1 a.m. at that point, and my manager insisted that I let Jason give me a ride. I tried to politely decline, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I also figured that maybe I was just paranoid about the bad vibes. I reluctantly accepted the ride and got in his car. We didn't talk the entire ride, aside from me giving him directions on how to get to my dorm. Luckily, it was a short ride. He followed my directions and dropped me off. I just said thank you, got out, and then went inside. I breathed a sigh of relief and told myself that I was just way too harsh on the guy. I shouldn't judge someone just because they're awkward and conventionally unattractive. I only worked at that bar for another 2 months, and I never really spoke to Jason again other than our usual greetings. And luckily, I didn't have to take any more rides from him before I quit. Now, I'm going to give you some background information about my social media presence. I have a Facebook that I've always kept very private, and that's where I have only very close friends and family. My Instagram, however, was public, although I only posted every few months, so it wasn't really a big deal to me. Anyway, a few months after I stopped working at the bar, I got a notification that I had a friend request on Facebook. The name on the account was none other than Jason the Bouncer. He didn't have a profile picture though. It was just his name and a fairly blank profile. I never told him my last name nor tagged the bar on my Facebook, so I thought it was weird that he'd found me. But I just figured he'd seen my name on some paperwork at the bar or something. I had no interest in being friends with him, so I declined his request and blocked him. A few months later, I checked my new followers on Instagram, and I saw his name and blank profile picture yet again. I got a sinking feeling in my stomach, but I figured he just didn't get the hint on Facebook, so I decided to block him on Instagram and just be done with it. A few years went by and I'd forgotten all about him, but then randomly in 2014 I had a new friend request from Jason. He had created a whole new Facebook profile. This one was also faceless. I was really annoyed because, why would he think that I would accept him after I'd already blocked him on both of my socials? For the third time, I blocked him and just went on with my life. Fast forward a few more years when yet another faceless Jason profile popped up on my Facebook and tried to add me. At this point, I was really annoyed and creeped out because he was being way too persistent and clearly didn't know how to take no for an answer. So what did I do? You guessed it. I blocked him again. This pattern happened a few more times throughout the next few years, but never really escalated beyond new profiles and friend requests. Until this year in 2024. I'm 31 years old now, married with 2 beautiful daughters. We were hanging out at home one night when I got a text from a random number that I didn't recognize. It said, "You're a beautiful person, Alyssa, inside and out." It confused me because this was such a random yet personal message. It seemed friendly though, so I wasn't initially alarmed. I responded and then said, "Thank you, I'm sorry, but I don't have your number saved. Who is this?" The response I got was, "To be honest, it's Jason from a decade ago." I read online about someone who was struggling. She said that if it wasn't for her babies, she wouldn't be here. I got upset. I wasn't going to text you, but I did anyway. If that was you, I want to help you. I'm sorry for everything. And if you want me to go away, just tell me and I'll never bother you again. I come in good faith. I was immediately on edge, but again I was confused because I knew 2 Jasons. One was the creepy bouncer that I'd never truly spoken to, and the other was a guy that I dated for a few months back in 2016, which was pretty close to a decade ago. I was honestly thinking it was my ex, because there's absolutely no way that bouncer Jason would have my number. So I reluctantly replied, "Jason who?" He replied, "Jason that used to work at the bar with you." My heart sank. I was too stunned to speak for a few minutes. My mind was racing. What was he even talking about in that message? I'd never posted anything of that sort on any of my social media, nor had I even had those thoughts. I had no idea what he was talking about, and more importantly, how did he get my phone number? I had never given him my phone number 13 years ago, and even if he had somehow gotten it from our old boss, my phone number has changed a few times over the years. There's no way that he should have had it. I went on a Googling spree to try and figure out how easy it was to access my personal information, and unfortunately it was pretty easy. I was able to find my current workplace and my current and past addresses. I could not, however, find my current phone number, but I suspect he went on one of those public info websites, paid the fee, and then got access to my information. I started internally panicking and immediately blocked his phone number. I decided to fill in my husband on what was going on. I hadn't ever told him about the persistent friend request because it happened so infrequently and it never really escalated beyond that, so it never seemed important to bring up. Anytime he popped up, I'd be annoyed for a few seconds and then just hit block and just forget all about it. My husband asked what he looked like, so I decided to Google his name to see if I could find a picture of him online. This is where the true horror starts. The first thing that popped up when I Googled his name was a mugshot. What was the mugshot for, you ask? Stalking. Jason had been stalking a child. It started in 2006 when she was 11 years old while he was her school bus driver. He hacked her teacher's email and ordered her school pictures. For what reason, I don't even want to think about it. He proceeded to stalk her for 8 years. I'm still not even sure of the entire extent of the stalking, as the articles didn't go into full detail. But I do know that her family had taken out protection orders against him every year starting in 2007. In 2015 or 2016, her family captured video footage of him lurking on their property at least twice, prompting the police to arrest him and then charge him with stalking. He was convicted and went to jail, but only for a very brief period of time. Interviews with his victim's family said they were terrified of his release, and that they were certain he would come back, that he doesn't think like the rest of us, and that he seriously needs psychological help. I couldn't find any further updates about that situation, so I can only assume that he left her alone, but I can't be certain. I do, however, now know exactly why I felt such creepy vibes radiating off of him back in 2011. He was actively stalking a child at the time. After learning all of this information, I was beyond terrified. Why was he still trying to contact me after 13 years of me blocking him? What was he trying to achieve? Had he driven by my work? Had he been parked outside of my apartment? What was the extent of his stalking behavior? The unknown of it all is what was scariest. I've watched enough true crime to know that I should have a paper trail of this. If the friend requests and texts had been all, I probably wouldn't have made a police report. But with a prior long-term stalking conviction, I wasn't going to chance it, especially since I have daughters now. I called the police and told them what had happened. Truth be told, part of me felt like I was making a big deal out of nothing. But then I reminded myself that 13 years of him trying very hard to contact me was not normal behavior. The police officer was very sympathetic towards my situation and told me that I made the right decision by starting a paper trail just in case anything else happened. He also advised that I should go to the courthouse to take out a protection order. With his past, it would be easy to get one, and that would ensure that he can't contact me in any way, shape, or form. Otherwise, he'd go to jail again. So I did exactly that. I got an email back a few hours after filing the protection order saying that my request was granted. I felt an immediate sense of relief. However, for the first few weeks after this all went down, I was still extremely paranoid. I thought that he'd be outside of my work or my apartment just waiting for me. I was looking over my shoulder constantly. After a few more weeks, I realized that the protection order probably did the trick, and I've since relaxed a bit. Fingers crossed it can stay that way. So to everyone out there, Google yourself to see how much of your personal information can be found online, and do your best to wipe as much as you can. You never know who's watching. Hey everyone. Before I get started on this story, I wanted to say that this is a very popular story. You've probably heard this one before, either by me or another narrator. I'm pretty sure I narrated it a long time ago, but I felt like it really fit this topic, so I decided to just re-narrate it and include it in this video. I'm sure that once you start listening, you'll recognize it if you've already heard it, but if you just want to go ahead and skip it, I have the timestamps in the pinned comment if you want to do so. I just wanted to mention that before we get started. Without any more interruptions, let's continue. One time I went to the bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to much bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a really cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said that her name was Candace, and I noticed that she had really bright red hair. I assumed that she dyed it. It was pretty but unnatural. Anyways, this girl was flirting with both me and my friend. You could tell that my friend was already very drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was drunk already too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was just trying to get free drinks, so I told her that we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend then went to the bathroom. Before he came back, he was then kicked out by the bouncers. He was too drunk, I guess. Candace and I went outside with them. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it though that he could barely answer her. I told her that he was too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea of what happened. Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him. But I told her no because I had to stay with them, and I was more sober than him. He was my responsibility. I told her the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed that she thought I was jealous or cock-blocking, but my friend could barely stand it and had lost interest in Candace already at that point. She immediately had started flirting with me, and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home and said we could go to her place alone. At this point, I had already had a few drinks, and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I stumbled slightly on the way to her car. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held onto my arm. "Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. Everything was just happening way too easy for me, so I felt uneasy. We got in her car and we drove down the street. "You want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it, so don't worry about paying," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and I wanted to be able to carry myself through the rest of the night. Sometimes I make myself look stupid when I'm drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace more than I already did earlier by telling her my friend was too drunk. I told her that I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to just get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it with. She went in the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed that she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth instead of a pint. On the car ride, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips too, but she just kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice and pretend to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor in the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know that I was acting drunker than I was. She actually believed I was sloppy drunk when I was simply just buzzed. I took a couple of more sips of liquor and finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I'd called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her. She didn't react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she had lied to me about her name initially. We drove up to her house. I pretended to trip and then stumbled into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked. We walked in her house, and she closed her front door and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but assumed that she just didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the bathroom. I walked into her bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. I felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise, and I made myself puke up the liquor I drank. I flushed and went to the sink and started to drink the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk anymore, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I wanted to pretend to be drunk. I turned off the sink, and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who was she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. The very moment that I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head. That strange, very bright red hair going into another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me. "Let's go in my room," she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. That's when I realized it was another girl with the same wig on. It was a wig the whole time. She changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea that it was a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her that I just needed to use the bathroom one more time, and told her sorry I was so drunk. "It's fine, just hurry up in there," she said. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I then heard her whisper something to someone again. This time, I think I actually heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was happening, and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it, and ran faster than I've ever ran in my life. I didn't look behind myself or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, ran through someone else's backyard, hit a road, and ran toward the main road. I kept running down the main road until I saw a 24-hour convenience store. I ran into the store and stood straight at the front of the store and in front of the camera. I then called a taxi and went home. I tried to think about what happened that night. What was she or they planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought that maybe it was a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And mostly, why did she wear a wig that she gave to another girl to wear? Who was she talking to? What did it mean? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? The next day after this incident, I went back to the house with a couple of friends just to see what was going on. Nobody was there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it only for that night and never came back. I'm a female. About a decade ago, when I was 19, I lived in a small college town with my sister and her best friend. I worked graveyard shifts at a gas station that was almost a 10-minute walk from my house. The town was very safe, and I never had any incidents walking alone at night before, so I didn't really have an issue walking to work late at night.